In the business world, there are countless stories of people who've gone from rags to riches. And there are even more who have gone from rags to riches back to rags. In any business, it's really hard to climb to the top, and it's even harder to stay on top. But this is a story that begins with two brothers who did just that. John and Horace Dodge were really a unique breed. They were astute businessmen and innovative engineers, and just as importantly, they were uncommonly street smart. These were two guys who lived life to its fullest. Back in the early 1900s, most people got into the automobile business just to get a piece of the action. The Dodge brothers, however, set out to build a better automobile, and they did it. The strong performance and high quality of their first vehicles carried into the Dodge products that followed, even after John and Horace were gone. The Dodge story is rich with groundbreaking products and unique innovations, but it's really the story of Horace and John, because their can-do attitude lived through the decades and lives on at Dodge today. While literally hundreds of other nameplates have come and gone, their bold, risk-taking spirit is still alive and well at Dodge. As the saying goes, the more things change, the more they stay the same. In the case of Dodge, that's a very good thing.
On October 29, 1998, Chrysler Chairman Robert Eaton kicked off the 15th anniversary celebration of the Dodge Caravan, not only the first, but also the most popular minivan in the world. But the Caravan wasn't the first Dodge that helped shape automotive history. Dodge cars and trucks have been breaking the rules and revolutionizing the way we drive for a long, long time. By the turn of the century, John and Horace Dodge were well known in the fledgling transportation industry. First as creators of a new breed of bicycle renowned for its capability, speed, and endurance, and later as first-class manufacturers and suppliers of automotive parts to pioneers like Ransom Olds and especially Henry Ford.
The first Ford cars, 1903 to about 1906, were virtually all Dodge. The only non-Dodge parts in those first Ford automobiles were wheels, tires, and a box-like wooden body.
In the early days, Ford cars were not Ford cars. Ford was merely an assembler of components, which were largely bought from the Dodges.
In 1914, the Dodge brothers were tired of designing and manufacturing auto parts for other people. They decided to start their own car company.
When the Dodge brothers announced that they were going to build their car, the reaction throughout the country was just incredible.
The Dodge brothers were excellent mechanics, excellent machinists, cared a lot about quality, cared about making a solid product.
First of all, it had an engine which was twice as big as a Model T, so it had much more power. It was an all-metal body, which was something that was new to the industry.
The Dodge cars, they were like the brothers in that there was absolutely no nonsense. What you saw was what you got.
What I like about the Dodge brothers is not that they built a strong and dependable car, but that they wanted to prove that to themselves over and over again.
Well, Dodge factory in Hamtramck had a test facility. Cars came off the assembly line, they were put through their paces, and then they were sent on their way. But there are stories about one of the Dodge brothers jumping into one of their cars and driving into a wall just to see how it would stand up.
When one of the employees asked, "Good Lord, what did you ever do that for?" And they said, "Well, you know, our customers are going to do this, so we might just as well do it first and find out what happens."
Dodge Maine started with the Dodge brothers building a factory there really to supply parts to Ford Motor Company.
As their company grew, the Dodge brothers, they remained personally involved in every aspect of the production of their cars. They had lunch with their workers. They would bring their lunches that their wives would pack for them, even after they owned this big business, and would sit around and have a beer with their factory workers on the lunch break.
I would have loved to know that the Dodge brothers, they were a wonderful pair.
The Dodge brothers were very complex people.
Basically, they were hard-drinking guys.
The brothers had a wild streak.
They were hellraisers.
They worked hard and they played hard. They broke up many a saloon in town, but they always paid for the rich.
In 1916, the Dodge brothers' reputation for building durable and reliable cars was put to the test. General John Blackjack Pershing took a fleet of several different makes of cars with him on his punitive expedition into Mexico to chase the revolutionary Pancho Villa. General Pershing was so pleased with his Dodge touring car that in less than 6 months, he ordered 250 more Dodges and demanded that these would be the only vehicles used by his staff in Mexico.
There were the Dodge brothers, the Studebaker brothers, and other brother teams, but the Graham brothers were the brothers that got Dodge into the truck business.
The Dodge company did not have a truck of its own. It bought the Graham brothers truck company first as a partly owned subsidiary and then eventually buying them out completely. The distinguishing feature of the Graham truck, which became the Dodge truck, was the fact that it was built rugged on a chassis specifically designed to be a truck rather than simply putting a truck body or a commercial body on an automobile frame.
Between its burgeoning fleet of trucks and its wide array of roadsters, touring four-door sedans and coupes, the Dodge brothers and their company were on a roll. Until suddenly, in 1920, both Dodge brothers died. At age 56, John Dodge was stricken with influenza while attending the National Automobile Show in New York City. Horace was also stricken with the flu and never fully recovered. He died in November of the same year, some say, of a broken heart. The death of the Dodge brothers left a powerful vacuum within the company, a vacuum that would not be filled until 1928, when Walter P. Chrysler, who had his own reputation for mechanical and engineering excellence, bought the Dodge brothers motor car company for $170 million.
The newspapers at the time described the purchase of Dodge by Chrysler as a minnow swallowing a whale.
It was an example of Walter Chrysler at his savviest.
Of the particular things that Dodge offered Chrysler Corporate, they still didn't have a founder. They still didn't have a bodybuilding capacity. And Dodge had both of those. Plus, they had the dealer network, which Chrysler could very much use.
Fred, I think you and your engineers have done a great job.
Mr. Chrysler, we put everything we had into this new Dodge car. The more we test it, the more we drive it, the more we love it.
The purchase of Dodge made this huge company, this big corporation, out of what had been a pretty good-sized car company. And you had two companies that had both had a reputation for quality, reliability, and dependability, and you put them together, and all of a sudden, you had basically just formed the American Big Three.
Meanwhile, Dodge was looking for a symbol to seal its reputation as a sturdy, dependable vehicle. In 1932, a ram first appeared as a hood ornament on Dodge cars. And not just any ram, a Rocky Mountain bighorn, the only wild sheep in America.
American Beauty, the name given to the loveliest of flowers, and in a broader sense, a title symbolic of outstanding beauty. And that's why the new Dodge has won instant acclaim as the American Beauty of motordom.
Throughout the 1930s, Dodge cars were no longer considered high-quality entry-level vehicles. Dodge, with Mr. Chrysler's influence, was now a car you could move up to and aspire to, not unlike a Pontiac or an Oldsmobile. Except with a Dodge, you could purchase a mid-priced car with a reputation for dependability and reliability that no other brand could match. In fact, by now, the word dependability, used so often by Dodge in its advertising campaigns, was now officially recognized in most dictionaries.
America has decided to arm herself for protection against any aggressor. And the assembly lines of the automobile industry now become assembly lines of defense.
World War II saw the end of civilian auto production. Under the leadership of Chrysler President K.T. Keller, the tradition of Dodge manufacturing engineering was combined with Chrysler engineering to build more than 18,000 engines for the B-29 Superfortress planes.
You know, you can't expect soldiers to fight unless you can get them to where it's going on. We'll move them up to the front, and we know what they'll do after they get there.
And at Dodge plants around the country, more than 500,000 vehicles of all shapes and sizes rolled off the assembly line, providing the backbone of the U.S. Army's ground transportation in Europe and Africa.
The Power Wagon was a happy occurrence. It was like the Jeep. It was developed for the war, it was developed for the military, and then after the war, they found a use for it.
We know from very personal experience what this truck is capable of.
The Power Wagon, in fact, was the quintessential Dodge vehicle. Go anywhere, rugged, dependable, just absolutely would not let you down in any driving situation that you could conceive of.
What makes this wagon go? The power plant under this hood. An L-head type 6-cylinder 95 horsepower motor with 6.7 to 1 compression ratio.
The Power Wagon was a big truck.
Power Wagon was a big sport utility vehicle way before its time.
And now we get a first-hand demonstration of why Forestry Patrol crews swear by Power Wagon.
With its four-wheel drive, 8 forward and 2 reverse speeds, the Power Wagon helped reinforce Dodge's reputation for power and performance.
Wow, wow! What a car! Yeah, some car, that Dodge Diplomat.
Unfortunately, when it came to design and styling, Dodge's post-war cars and trucks were left in the dust.
What Chrysler eventually did is they hired somebody who was going to transform the look of their cars, and that man was Virgil Exner.
Virgil Exner has given your cars the look of motion.
By the time Exner got through with Dodge, his first entry being the 1955 Dodge, Dodges were the most flamboyant cars in the corporation, sporting 2- and 3-tone color combinations that were designed to erase this image of a staid and frumpy Dodge and replace it with a car that they said was flair, fashioned, and alive with beauty.
And the V8 engine!
Yes, and the V8 engine.
But it wasn't just the look of the new Dodges that caused people to take a second look at the brand. It was also what was underneath the hood that captured people's attention.
The combination of a powerful V8 engine in a relatively lightweight structure was a rocket. It was a very fast car, much faster than any of us had anticipated.
Dodge D500, a knockout car. I mean, not a teenager's car, still thought of as a family car, good looking, but every once in a while you'd see one on the street and boy.
The first Dodge D500 was the pace car created, I believe, for the 1954 Indianapolis 500.
And these cars were quick, they were exciting, they would blow off a lot of the cars that we regarded at that point as performance.
This is Boston Harbor. And those are Volkswagens.
The big three have been outflanked in their home territory and are faced with difficult, complex, and costly reappraisals and reshaping.
Suddenly, Americans began to take a second look at much smaller, less expensive cars, like the American-made Rambler, and European imports like Renault and Volkswagen. In order to survive, Dodge fought back with a larger, lower-cost car of its own, the popular 6-cylinder Dart.
The Dodge Dart was a car that was in the tradition of the old Dodges. They were solid, reliable, start up every morning, no problems.
And years later, the old slant six engine that first came to life in those cars was still regarded as one of the great engines of that era.
They called it the slant six because it was literally tilted over, I think 30 degrees, so that you could have a lower hood line. The engine was bulletproof.
And the race is on.
Muscle car, like a muscle man, you know, powerful, strong, fast. It was a car that was built with only one thing in mind, performance. You had to work on your car because even though your car was a fast car from the factory, there were parts you could buy, things you could do to beef it up, make it a little faster.
When I first came to Chrysler in 1964, they used to take the Hemis and the big torque flight transmission that we were so famous for in those days, and they'd take the cars out into a parking lot behind our design studio, and then they would simply floor the car and then push the push-button transmissions from drive to reverse to drive to reverse to drive to reverse, and columns of blue rubber smoke would just spew into the air, and the noise was horrendous.
Don Garlitz leads off in his Dodge-powered AA dragster against Ron Abbott in Hell's Apartment.
What drag racing gave drivers, car owners, enthusiasts in the 60s was the opportunity to prove the power of their car, their worth as a driver.
The industry's always had a saying, win on Sunday, sell on Monday. In other words, if they would go and win races on Sunday, they knew that the media would cover it. They knew that people were excited about racing. They knew that it would get covered in television and radio and newspapers. And sure enough, if you track it, over time, you'll see that whichever brand wins the NASCAR championship tends to have better sales.
The Chargers. These are the men they named the car after. Bobby Allison in Charger number 22. Buddy Baker in number 6. Paul Goldsmith in Charger number 99. James Hilton in Charger 48. Bobby Isaac in Charger number 71. These are the men who drive 2 tons of steel at speeds up to 200 miles an hour. The Chargers.
An organization called the Ram Chargers, a bunch of engineers, young engineers at Chrysler who spent their after-hours time finding ways to make more horsepower.
They were race fanatics. They wanted to do racing cars. It wasn't just a hobby. It wasn't just a nutball fad. For them, it was what the automobile business was all about.
You measured your worth in some ways as an engineer on Saturdays and Sundays at drag strips or oval tracks or wherever.
The leader is here. New Dodge Charger, the dream car that had to see the light of day.
When people were looking to buy a muscle car, they wanted a car that had a big engine, would go fast, and suck gas.
Dodge had the Scat Pack, which was their amalgam of their cars, and they created a club that you could join and that you received a patch and a decal and a quarterly magazine, I believe.
This was a grouping, a collection of cars that included the Charger RT, the Super B, the Coronet and Coronet RT, and later the Challenger fell into that.
They not only had bizarre names for the cars, but they also had weird names for the colors that they painted the cars.
The colors were a lot of fun. And not only were they fun to look at, in their bright hues, they were fun to name.
There was a purple color. It was plum crazy. The yellow was screaming banana yellow.
Go Man Go, a mellow yellow, a Hemi orange. And there were a few that we couldn't use, the kind we dreamed up in the studios, like Come and Get Me Copper, Fisher Body Rust, a Statutory Grape. They wouldn't let us use those.
We're just dropping a few hints. We want you to see the surprise package of the year. It's going to sweep you right off your feet. Join the Dodge Rebellion!
Adolescent and young men are attracted to 2 things. They're attracted to cars and they're attracted to girls. So one way to get them to buy the cars was to use girls to sell the cars.
Here come the Dodge boys. Go get them, good guys. Saddling up for a drive. Don't let them farmers get away.
You had the Dodge boys, who were the ones that went out and raced. They were the tough macho guys who drove these great hot cars. You had the Dodge girls who stood next to the cars wearing the mini skirts or the hot pants, and of course, the white go-go boots up to the knees.
Oh, I'm so nervous. What if I got Dodge fever?
Some things just can't wait, like the Dodge Dart Swinger 340.
The Dodge brothers would have loved the muscle car era, with its big engines and the over-the-top macho bravado of that era. The brand dominated the NASCAR circuits, as well as late-night cruises on main streets and drag strips all across America. But like the Dodge brothers themselves, the muscle cars of the 1960s burned bright, but also burned out all too fast.
In order to stay in competition, the driver must get his car across the finish line.
Muscle cars were prodigious users of fossil fuels. They did a pretty good job of depleting our country's reserves.
Most everybody seems to think that it was the fuel crisis that did it, but it really wasn't. What killed it, though, were insurance rates.
I think the government and the insurance industry were interested in slowing down the horsepower race. And certainly one way to do that was to make the cost of ownership high. And for a young person, when suddenly your variable expense of insurance goes from $200 a year to $600 a year, it gets your attention. Got mine.
Dodge is right on target with small cars.
By the early 1970s, between a crippling oil embargo by the world's oil-producing countries and new U.S.-mandated fuel emission standards, the message was clear. The once mighty Dodge brand was in trouble.
Come on, be a kid our age. Play with a new toy that's really fun.
The spirit of the Dodge brothers was alive and well in this new line of trucks known as adult toys from Dodge. Who can forget the powerful Little Red Truck or the sportier Warlock? Not to mention a more familiar name from the past, the rugged four-wheel drive half-ton macho power wagon.
For whatever turns you on, try one of the new adult toys from Dodge.
Unfortunately, these big toys weren't enough to save the rest of the company. As the brand approached the 1980s, Dodge needed something more and something less.
All for one, one for all. Omni's one that does it all. Lots of talent, lots of fun. Omni does it all for one.
In 1978, Dodge created the first domestically produced transverse engine front-wheel drive four-cylinder car. The first real American alternative to European and Japanese imports, the all-new fuel-efficient Omni was the brand's attempt to beat the competition at their own game.
Chrysler is also having trouble selling things besides cars. The administration-backed plan to bail out the company drew fire today at Senate Banking Committee hearings.
Unfortunately, despite the fact that Dodge and all of Chrysler were on the verge of bankruptcy, Congress didn't exactly jump at the chance to help bail the company out with federal loan guarantees.
Where does it all stop? If the 10th largest corporation in the country can't make it and has to have federal loan guarantees, and what about the 20th and the 100th and the 2000th?
Some kind of assurance was needed, a sign, a signal, anything to show the American people that an investment in Chrysler and Dodge would be a wise one.
The future's here and Chrysler has what you've waited for. A brand new generation, Chrysler's K-Car Superstar.
The good news about the K cars, the Dodge Aries in the 1980s was the fact that finally the Dodge dealers had a sedan that they could sell. But it came at the expense of the Dodge image.
You had K cars that said that on the car, K car. I mean, that's as generic as it comes. This is the code that the company used for engineering purposes inside.
The K cars changed the division from the brand that it used to be, the power brand, the big engine brand, the I'm bigger than anybody else brand. Dodge traded its image as a powerful brand, as a brand that said, I am creating powerful engines, for a brand that became family. I'm going to give you, Mr. and Mrs. America, the family vehicle that you need.
The K car soon gave birth to another kind of vehicle, a mysterious new breed of automobile that industry insiders knew only as Dodge's tall car.
Introducing our new front-wheel drive Dodge Caravan. Great mileage and shorter than a full-size station wagon.
I think that it is safe to say that the minivan is the most significant new product to hit the North American marketplace or the automobile industry worldwide since World War II. The minivan is an entirely new concept in automobiles. It's a one-volume automobile. It's a toaster-shaped vehicle that has all of the capacities of a van, more capacity than a station wagon, and yet it will fit in a normal garage and it can be driven like a normal automobile.
It was the perfect combination of elements at the exact right time. You had baby boomers really starting to have families and children. They had dogs and skis and bicycles.
As a baby boomer, you didn't want to drive a station wagon. It said I have to have 2.2 kids, a sheepdog, and I have to live in a big brick house in the suburbs.
The curious thing is that the K cars were very ordinary, and the minivans, which used exactly the same components, were inspired. And it's very difficult to explain why.
In the 1980s, Dodge managed to hold on to at least some semblance of its old in-your-face, my engine is faster than yours attitude with such popular models as the Dodge Daytona, the Shelby Lancer, and Dodge Spirit RT. As successful as these cars were, they were a far cry from the glory days of Dodge Fever and the Dodge Rebellion. A new management team, which included Chrysler President Bob Lutz, decided once and for all Dodge would stop being in the business of just trying to stay afloat and survive. If the brand was going to thrive and grow, Dodge had to become a car and truck company again, taking chances, risking everything, and from now on, producing only the kind of capable, high-performance cars and trucks that even John and Horace Dodge would be proud of.
The Viper not only makes a huge promise, it then just turns around and fulfills that promise every time you fasten your belts and poke it real hard. It just does everything you expect it to do. It ought to separate your retinas. It ought to just lift your heart and light your dreams, and it does.
The Viper is one of the greatest projects that ever took place in the history of the industry. It really started out as a concept car that they put in the Detroit Auto Show, and people flipped. People just loved this thing.
What happened is we started getting letters. People sent money, they'd send checks, and we had to give them back, but you know, that just showed the genuine enthusiasm. And so then we said, well, gee, we got to find a way to try to do this.
Typically in the past, what we've done is it usually takes 4 or 5 years to do a car. From a timing standpoint, we developed the Viper and put it on the road in less than 30 months. And that's absolutely phenomenal.
I think that what Bob Lutz wanted to do was send a signal to everybody that this was not a sick company.
The Dodge Viper sends a message to the buying public from Chrysler Corporation that says Dodge is a division that's alive, it's well, it's vibrant, it's enthusiastic, and it's going to be here for a long time.
In the 1990s, the spirit of the Dodge brothers returned in full force, starting with the introduction of the bold, innovative cab-forward look of Dodge Intrepid. And that was just the beginning.
The new 1994 Dodge Ram pickup.
There was a certain point of time in the early 80s where Chrysler seriously considered going out of the truck business.
Chrysler had this old Dodge truck. It was a box. It was doing terribly. In fact, the only thing that was really helping sell it was they started putting the Cummins diesel engine in it.
When it came time to redesign the Dodge Ram truck, they did a kind of an ordinary truck, a truck that looked good. They codenamed it Phoenix. They researched it. It was a nice looking truck, but it wasn't really a love-hate relationship. It was just nice.
What the Dodge team said when they were preparing this new Dodge Ram is that we don't want lukewarm customers. It may turn off 70% of the market, but if it turns on 30% of the market, we're going to be a big winner.
The inspiration for the Ram came from those big over-the-road haulers that you'd see out on I-80 or I-70 going cross-country, the long conventionals, where you would have this big truck image.
The Ram was just a brilliant stroke. Every car manufacturer, every one of the American Big Three had a big, competent pickup truck. But the thought that by capturing some of the broad-shouldered, macho appeal of heavy-duty, long-distance trucks in a pickup truck, they could make a difference for the Dodge pickup, which had been languishing for a long time. They pulled it off.
Vehicles like Ram and the Viper, created by the all-new Dodge platform teams, brought the brand full circle, reigniting the Dodge brothers' passion for creating bold, innovative, high-performance cars and trucks. And with each new vehicle, the new Dodge broke new ground, stretched new muscles, took new chances, and broke new rules.
What Dodge has brought, I think, to the industry, and certainly to Chrysler, is a much overriding sense of passion.
Designing cars is a passionate experience. Engineering cars is a passionate experience. Creating cars is a passionate experience. If it isn't, well, what are you doing in the business? After all, if it's not exciting, why do it?